Also, did you get the big product placement for Tide?
I did.
I mean, the box was like freaking huge.
It was huge. And she positioned it just so.
Yeah, right in the shadow, right through the light. There it is, Tide.
I'm going to get some super bright clothes.
I know. From Rosemary's Baby and Reagan McNeil, to Jason, Freddy, and Chucky, to Samara, Jigsaw, and Pennywise, we can't get enough. If it's blood-curdling, spine-tingling, breath-quickening, or soul-stealing, we're ready to watch it. Welcome to Hilltop Horror Movie Reviews. I'm your host, Ray Richards. With me tonight are my two co-hosts, Helen Stewart.
Hello.
And Anne Conley.
Hello there.
So last time we had in the studio with us Anne's sister, Lizzie. She is not with us. Is she back at her place safely?
Actually, she is in the wonderful world of Jacksonville, Florida at this moment.
All right, cool. At least it's a lot warmer there than it is here, I'm sure. We also lost you, Anne, at the end of the last recording. Your little one came down and you had to take him upstairs to bed. So how did that work out?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys spoke on the air to the listeners about sort of how that worked, but we had almost sort of like a little mini child possession moment of my 3-year-old coming down into the studio very silently and very bewildered with his hair sticking out in all directions. It was very much like a scene right out of a movie. So if anybody's out there, in the haunted house business and you're looking for an effect to recreate, that is definitely the one. Scared the bejesus out of us as we were doing this recording. So, yep, sorry I wasn't here for the tail end of that review. Had a lot of fun talking about it, but needless to say, had to get the little one back up and into bed.
All right. Well, tonight we are going to review the 1978 American slasher film Halloween, directed and scored by John Carpenter, co-written with producer Deborah Hill and starring Donald Pleasance and Jamie Lee Curtis in her film debut. So when we start out, we talk about what our expectations are going into the review. So, Anne, do you want to talk about your expectations?
Sure. I love doing these reviews and I love modern day horror movies. And it was interesting to me thinking back to sort of some of these quintessential Halloween horror movies, right? Between Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, Halloween, the whole Freddy versus Jason type of just all of these quintessential, right, scary movie characters back in the day. But then I really started thinking about it and I was like, had I actually seen the Michael Myers movie? I knew I had seen Jason and I've definitely seen some Freddy's, but, had I seen Michael Myers? And it turns out, no, I had actually not seen this full film. So I loved going back and having the opportunity to watch it with this, especially as the new movie is coming out or in theaters now with Jamie Lee Curtis. And one of the things I was really excited about was seeing Jamie Lee Curtis's entree, of course, into this genre as well. Because, even when we reviewed Scream, they referred to her in that movie as, right, the Scream Queen. That she's, right, the woman in this genre. Mm-hmm. So I was really excited to see that.
Yeah, I had not seen this movie either. And as a matter of fact, I think I've only ever seen one of the Halloween movies all the way through. And that was Halloween H2O, which was the one 20 years ago that was supposed to be the last Halloween movie when Jamie Lee Curtis came back to reprise her role. And now we're 20 years later, which is amazing for me to say that, but 20 years later. And the new, I guess H40, I don't know, whatever it would be, is out in the theaters. So I was anticipating watching this movie and not liking it very much because I figured it was going to be fairly dated. And as with some of the older movies, they've been sort of done to death over and over again as the movies that have come after them have sort of perfected what they tried to do. And I did have some quibbles with the movie, which we'll get into. But I was stoked to see the original slasher. What do you think, Helen?
I think I'm crying a little tear right now because this is my favorite horror movie of all time. I probably have seen this at least 5 times. Believe I own it on VHS since I couldn't find it on my DVD collection. I knew I was going to enjoy the movie, so I have nothing more to add.
All right. Well, with that, Anne, why don't you play the trailer?
Absolutely. All right. It is trailer time. And action.
Halloween night. A small American town. 15 years ago. Michael? Halloween.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil. I think he'll come back.
On Halloween night, 1963, in the town of Haddonfield, Illinois, 6-year-old Michael Myers, dressed in a clown costume, stabs his older sister Judith to death with a knife in her home. 15 years later, Michael is now 21, and on October 30th, 1978, Michael's psychiatrist Dr. Samuel Loomis and his colleague Marion Chambers arrive at Smith's Grove Sanitarium to escort Michael to court. Noticing that the patients are wandering about, Loomis gets out of the car to investigate, allowing Michael, who has escaped, to steal Loomis's car. Returning home to Haddonfield, Michael kills a mechanic for his uniform and steals a mask, some knives, and some rope from a local hardware store.
First of all, I'd like to say if I had seen that trailer prior to watching this movie, I probably never would have watched that movie because that was pretty terrible. However, since I do absolutely love this movie, you're probably not going to hear too many criticisms from me. I love how it starts off with the 6-year-old boy's point of view with the camera. He's outside of the house, kind of looking through the windows. His older sister's trying to get a little action with a boyfriend. He sees her going up to the bedroom with the boyfriend, and he gets into the house, has a costume on, the clown costume, which is creepy in and of itself.
Sure.
Puts a mask on, goes and starts stabbing his sister, and then you see everything through the eyes of the mask, and I just think it's so well done, especially at the end when he leaves the house. It's very methodical looking. And then the parents come home, they take off the mask, and there's literally like Dr. Loomis's, there's nothing behind the eyes. There's nothing, like the 6-year-old kid's just standing there and it just looks like there's nothing. Just love that part.
So I really love this from the get-go of the opening with just sort of the classic imagery of the Halloween with the title with the floating pumpkin. I just thought again, 1978, right? Just kind of a lot of practical effects at the end of the day. This is before CGI, kids. So, how do we make this look creepy? How do we make these effects? So I thought that was a neat intro. Watching from the outsider's perspective, you're kind of wondering who this is, right? So to me, I didn't know this whole time, right, that it's the brother, it's, a child at that point. And you're kind of following along. Somebody's stalking the house, somebody's in the house. And then you see, right, the sister and the boyfriend. The boyfriend comes down, sort of walks right by, the camera, which is the young boy's perspective. And you're kind of thinking, would he not see this intruder? What's going on? Like, is that just really bad camera work? Or is there something else going on here? One of the pieces that did crack me up, though, is, of course, the boyfriend's, putting on the clown mask and, goes up to, have some fun with his girlfriend. And then the boy goes up and picks up the clown mask. And you see this weird arm come out.
Yeah, the weird arm.
That I was like, whoa, what was that? It was so skinny and so long.
It was like a stick. They had like a hand, on, and they went and it was almost like Puppet Master is what I thought.
Yes.
The Puppet Master movies, but
that's what I thought. It almost seemed very puppet-like. And then I thought, oh, it's got to be a woman, because it's like a long skinny arm or something like that. But I totally agree. The perspective of the mask coming over the camera, the effect of looking through the eyes, that was really cool. Just cool from, I think, a filmography perspective, cool idea directorially. And then, of course, the knife comes out and slashing. One of the things that really impressed upon me right from the get-go is that, right, there's no blood and there's hardly any clear violence. So again, back in the day, you guys just reviewed Exorcist not too long ago, where you talk about just really how violent it is and, all the blood work, all the language and everything else. And this was almost the opposite, right? There was violence that was happening and there was slashing going on. There was no blood. You didn't see any physical stabbing. It was all kind of, behind the mask, which was just interesting for me. I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll see where this goes. Again, it's a young girl, so maybe they didn't want to go that far. But then again, after having seen Evil Dead not too long ago with the outrageous amounts of blood, this really kind of made up for it, balanced it all out at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what you see or don't see in the movie is due to the fact that it was made on a shoestring budget, and they really didn't have the ability to do some of the things that maybe they would have wanted to do if they had more money.
Hitchcock used chocolate syrup for Blood and Psycho. I think they could have come up with ketchup.
Well, I don't know. I just think a lot of what you see though is like that. So I generally liked the beginning, right? The whole from the kid's point of view. I will say I'm gonna point out some things. Helen, it's okay.
Okay.
So first, I do think that the where the camera was in relation to the height of the kid kind of changed. I was like, the kid's growing taller. He's like way up high, and then he's kind of lower or whatever. And so, it is what it is. But I thought that as the scene went on. And then the funny thing to me is that the boyfriend comes in and the sister, they're fooling around downstairs. And Michael's watching from the front. They're like, oh, let's go upstairs. They go upstairs. And by the time Michael comes around the house, goes in the door that's open for some reason. He doesn't open the door. It's already open. Walks in, decides to get a knife, and gets to the living room. The boyfriend's coming down the stairs, zipping his pants up. And I'm like, did they have sex? Because that's pretty quick. If he just went upstairs and came back. I guess one pump chump, I guess. He just came downstairs and that was the end of it. And the other thing is, so then the boy goes upstairs and the sister's door's open and she's basically naked. I mean, she has panties on or whatever, but that's it. She's topless and she's just hanging around. And
she's brushing her hair.
Yeah, we all brush our hair topless at night.
Yeah.
Don't you, Ray?
I probably do actually, but then again, I'm not a woman. So, and I don't have a younger sibling who could be roaming around the house, but I guess that's how they were in the Myers household.
She's clearly very unconcerned.
Yeah, she does seem very unconcerned.
But that was, to me, that was actually one of the creepier factors because then you have this little kid, which is why I didn't think it was a little kid in the first place, obviously for kind of a multitude of factors. But then, then he walks in and like she's naked and kind of goes up, but then she's saying, Michael, and you're kind of like, wait, what? And you don't know that she has a little brother yet, so you don't know the context of it, but you're just like, this is so weird. And I like the idea that they toy with this idea that he basically doesn't have a soul. I thought that idea was well played. I think that the zoom out, like it was very classic 70s, I think the look of it and everything. I think if they redid it today, they'd probably kind of play that up like a little bit. It might be more of like a zoom in than a zoom out, but it was good. It was good for setting the scene. Again, I just was like instantly transported back, like very, right, late 80s, or late 70s, early 80s, slow burn, just the look of the film, the tone of the film, the setting. Really just even the house, the way that it was situated.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the film looked really good. I expected it to look worse, and have aged worse, but I don't know if it was the remastered HD version I was watching that kind of made it look good or not. The music was quintessential, right? We all know the soundtrack or the theme. So although I did find that they played that an awful lot throughout the movie, but I like that. The interesting thing about Michael Myers to me watching this movie was, even though they say, or Loomis says repeatedly that, he doesn't have a soul, that there's nothing behind his eyes, and that he's doing this for essentially some unknown evil reason, the whole him going up and murdering his sister after she's had sex with her boyfriend and she's half naked, and then him going after the girls that are the same age as his sister and their sort of fornications throughout the movie, like it definitely feels like he has some sort of sexual issue in his psyche that's causing him to do this. He doesn't go after basically anybody else that he doesn't have to go after, right? I mean, he kills the store owner or whatever to get the clothes, and he only just steals, I think, the mask. So he doesn't even kill anybody in the store, I don't believe, to get the mask and the rope and the knives. So I feel like underneath of it all, he's sexually frustrated, I guess.
What I did find was that there is a book out there that somebody wrote prior to the movie being made that's supposed to describe Michael Myers' background, but it's a very rare book, so I don't even know if you can try to buy it.
Wow. Interesting.
And your issue with the female arm is that it actually was a female arm.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, I was like, oh, it's a lady.
Yeah, they had manicured nails.
Oh, yeah, it was so weird, right?
I mean, I literally thought it was like a stick with like a fake hand on it, and they just kind of like stuck it to the mask and like pulled it back. Like I literally didn't think it was a real person. So that's interesting.
Whoever that crew member is, get her a sandwich.
Yeah, it was.
I think it was Deborah Hill.
Was it? Was
Yeah.
it the producer? Oh, and also I just want to give her a shout out for a second. You know, I thought that was really interesting to me watching the credits in the beginning and seeing a female producer on this. I just thought, really, I mean, for a late 70s horror flick with John Carpenter, amazing. So
Yeah, she definitely does not get enough credit.
kudos, Deborah. So the one scene I wanted to talk about was the psych ward. So pulling up and the patients wandering around immediately, I thought that was actually a cool effect, you know, just sort of the weird people in robes wandering around. To me, it seemed very American Horror Story-esque kind of thing. That was neat. That was a good effect. Spooky.
I liked the whole scene with the doctor and the nurse driving, and it and the nurse like smoking the entire time. And
Yeah.
I mean, it just felt kind of real, I guess, in a way,
Like
right?
Authentic.
Authentic, yeah, authentic. And I don't know so much about when they got there. It was kind of dark, and I could see, I guess, the lack of money in there, right? Like all they see is like a gate, and it's kind of everything's dark, and they get out of the car, and then
They probably just like randomly found a gate. And they were
I'm-
like, let's just shoot
I'm
here.
saying, yeah, they probably just randomly were like, oh, we're going to film here tonight, and they did it, and they got out of there before the person who owns the house came down and was like, what the hell's going on? But
get some friends and some sheets to come on down. We'll just stick them in the yard.
yeah, exactly. And I was kind of surprised at how human Michael Myers seemed in that scene. Like I was surprised that they actually showed him that much of him kind of jumping on top of the car, and you get a sense that he's a real person, and he actually moves around a lot more fluidly than I thought Michael Myers would, I guess I should say, given the sort of way that we view him in sort of the legend that's come up, right? I mean, he's almost like Jason Voorhees, right? He stalks. He just kind of slowly stalks. And even in this movie, by the end of it, that's what he's doing. But I was surprised by how much we saw him in that scene.
I didn't understand that was Michael Myers at first.
Oh, I didn't either.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, later when they say, oh, he's escaped and he's the same dude, you're like, oh, okay, I'm putting the pieces together. But at that time, I thought it was a random inmate just attacking the car.
I mean, I assumed when he took the car that it was Michael Myers. But up to that point, like when he was on top of the car smashing it, I was like, is this just some random guy they're going to like shoot or drag off, and then Michael Myers is going to show up some other way?
The one part about that whole scene with the nurse and Dr. Loomis in the car was that they had the matchbook.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I never really thought that they played that up well enough to figure out what the connection was. I guess later on when you see the mechanic's car, you're like, oh, yes, that's Michael Myers. He had the or that's how they connected those two scenes together, that the car that he stole from the nurse and the doctor was at the scene of the mechanic's car because that matchbook was there. But I thought they could have done more with that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and I didn't really understand if Loomis, it was funny because the scene opens with him on the phone, right, on the payphone, and then he gets off the payphone, and then was he already there? Did he already find that stuff? Or did he get off the payphone and go, wait a minute, I think there's like the clothes Michael Myers was wearing, and he just randomly stopped there to use the telephone. Like I couldn't tell which of those worked because when he walked up, he like looked at the clothing and then he saw the matchbook, which kind of told you that that's definitely what it was. So I was confused by that minor point.
I had issues with that scene as well, sort of out of convenience. All of a sudden it opens up with the doctor on the payphone warning this town 73 miles away. Oh, he's coming, blah, 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 blah. Buddy, just get back in your car and drive the extra hour to get there. Well, instead, you're randomly stopping on the side of the road at some random payphone, and then I turn around and wait a second, there's a wrecked car behind. That was just my take on it. It seemed really sort of just like a convenient kind of scene.
Yeah,
But then I liked it when he went over to investigate the scene, and there was the dead body that he didn't even get to see. I thought that was like well played.
Yeah, if you play it the other way and you assume that he'd already seen at least the clothing, and then he made the telephone call, it makes it less convenient that he happened to be there and see those things, I guess.
I'm wondering if it was Michael Myers trying to say, because the clothes were draped over an open door on the mechanic's car. Like, here I am. I'm on my way there. Here's a clue for you. I want you to follow me.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I didn't get a good sense in this movie much of Michael Myers. I think that's the point. Like, he's supposed to be a blank slate, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't get, except for that he likes to kill people or likes to watch people die. So,
But, to Helen's point, we don't know why. We don't know what his motive is. I mean, to your point, Ray, he's sort of attacking the same girls.
there's a lot of sex involved in his stuff.
Definitely, it seems right. And this is sort of, again, with Scream, like sort of where the rules come from, which I'm sure we'll talk about once we get into it. Other than that, yeah, there's not a lot of character development because you're not really seeing him.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about this movie is that it, like Evil Dead 2, is essentially a survival movie over one night. The babysitters and all that stuff happens in one night. So there's not a whole lot of character development, quote unquote character development, in the movie because it doesn't happen over that much time.
I really have to say I hate that you're comparing this to Evil Dead 2.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'll deal with it, but it made me cringe a little.
The following day on Halloween, Michael stalks Laurie Strode. Throughout the day, Laurie notices Michael following her, but her friends Annie and Linda dismiss her concerns. Meanwhile, Loomis arrives in Haddonfield in search of Michael. After discovering that Judith Meyer's headstone has been stolen from the local cemetery, he meets with Annie's father, Sheriff Lee Brackett. The two begin their search at Michael's former home, where Loomis tries to warn the skeptical sheriff about the danger Michael poses, explaining that Michael is pure evil and capable of further violence, despite years of captivity. Brackett patrols the streets while Loomis waits and watches the house, expecting Michael to return there.
I love how they portray the town, Haddonfield.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, just picture perfect.
Yeah.
It looks like a picture perfect town that anyone would want to live in. And then it almost seems like maybe every picture perfect town has this creepy house that has some history, whether or not it's true. And it's the Myers house. And it does start off with Laurie's, I guess, dad is a real estate agent and is trying to sell the Myers house. And they go to the house and it's run down and broken down. And it was definitely gave like a nice, here's this picture perfect town and here's why we're going to start making it creepy.
You can see Nightmare on Elm Street takes that from this movie. I mean, it's very much like Freddy Krueger's house. It almost looks like Freddy Krueger's house. So I like that sort of touchstone between those two.
I think I was just so distracted by Jamie Lee Curtis. Okay, first of all, can we just talk about those tights? What was happening with those tights? That was awful. That was awful. I'm sorry, whoever the costume director was.
There was none.
Yeah, so she...
Everybody wore their own clothes except for her.
Oh, man, I believe it. So, yeah, it was one of those where, okay, they're playing her up to kind of be the prude, sort of the little girl. Like, she's got these, really opaque, ridiculous 6-year-old tights on and her outfit. Meanwhile, her girlfriends are much more, well-dressed, more sexual, obviously. She's the Girl Scout, as they refer to her throughout the movie. But I was also just so fascinated with her looks because I hadn't seen this movie before, so I hadn't really seen Jamie Lee Curtis when she was young. So seeing her with the long hair and just with a younger face, it actually really, kind of took me back for a second there because I was like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing to kind of see how people evolve. And just, she has such a distinctive look even today.
Mm-hmm.
And to see her young, I was like, to me, for whatever reason, my brain was like, I couldn't stop looking at her lips and her jaw. I was just kind of it was really interesting to me to just see her, in a younger form type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed all those scenes with her and her girlfriends kind of walking through the town and going to school and all that. It lent a very authentic sense of the town and of the people in the town.
I love the scene where the boys are bullying the little boy that Jamie Lee Curtis then goes to babysit with the pumpkin, and he drops the pumpkin, and it's, I don't know, I loved the song when I was in high school, the Rob Zombie song, because he took the, he's coming to get you, the boogeyman's coming to get you, and then he makes the song, and it just, I don't know, gave me some good memories of when I watched it back when I was 16.
Oh,
nice.
So that scene, I mean, obviously it was sad to me that poor little kid was being bullied, but one of the things there were two things that bothered me. One, he had rosacea, which I was like, that poor little kid has skin issues. Somebody get him some calamine lotion. And the other thing was, of course, the pumpkin he was carrying.
It's a huge pumpkin.
And first of all, you're like, that's going to be one heavy pumpkin. How can this little kid carry that? But right? Because pumpkins are heavy. I'm sorry. And then the other thing is that it's not like a typical pumpkin. So he's talking about carving this pumpkin, and he's got this funky, weird shaped gourd like pumpkin. And I know you guys were doing some research, right, about sort of the timing of when this was filmed and everything?
Yeah, so they had difficulty, right, finding pumpkins. It was filmed in, I believe, California. It was not filmed in anywhere where there would be an actual autumn. And that actually distracted me in the movie because I knew that watching it. And I was like, everything's green. All the trees have green leaves on them. They're like cactuses in the background and on people's porches. And then they have the like there are these, I guess, bags of leaves they used and they put out in the foreground when she's kind of walking along the sidewalk. That then behind her across the street there's no leaves anywhere. And just knowing that distracted me as I was watching the movie, kind of took me out of it a little bit, because in my popular imagination of this movie it was like actual fall, Pennsylvania fall. Everything's, yellow or orange or red or brown, and there's trees without any leaves on them, and it really wasn't that in the movie.
Without knowing that information, it only bothered me this time. So it never bothered me before. If I had known it, it probably would have, but I was looking for it this time.
I probably would not have noticed it either. I mean, if I had sat down to watch it on TBS or whatever, I probably wouldn't have noticed it, but critiquing it, yeah.
The thing that caught my eye were like the lush waves of ivy, in the suburbs. It didn't bother me that the trees were still green, because even in New England, we've had Halloweens where the leaves are still green. Like, for whatever reason, the seasons haven't quite caught up. It takes a little bit longer. So, but yes, definitely the idea that there was no browning grass, like there was lush ivy crawling all over the ground, right? There was no frost. And definitely the lack of pumpkins was definitely something I noticed. And like even just that kid kind of carrying that weird gourd, I was like, it just doesn't feel quite right. But it was, I mean, he fell on it and broke like a pumpkin, and then everything was right in the world. So, so it's okay.
So can we talk about Loomis for a second? Because he basically shows up in this town and just kind of stands around for most of the time at the house, like behind the bushes. Stalks the house, and like these little kids come up and he's like, move your ass, or whatever he says to scare them. And like, and the whole thing was kind of weird. I mean, he was kind of stalky. I think his character serves basically, two purposes. One is at the end to sort of be able to shoot Michael Myers, spoiler alert, but also Michael Myers doesn't do much through most of the movie to make you think that he's worthy of being that scary. He's scary because Loomis in every scene tells you he's scary. You haven't seen him for 8 years. 8 years he's been locked up, or the dead eyes, or anything like that. You don't even actually see him in the mask very much during the first 3/4 of the movie. Most of it's over his shoulder as he's like stalking these girls, which is creepy. But I think Loomis's whole point is just to re-emphasize or emphasize that this guy is evil.
I have to say, I don't know how much I really liked him as an actor, because I felt his few lines that he had were a little overact. Like, evil behind his eyes. Like, I just felt like, just say it. Yeah, he's got nothing behind there. Like, I don't know why he had to do it in such a dramatic, it was like a weird dramatic voice. I don't know if it was an accent issue for me, but I didn't like him as an actor playing that part.
I liked him as an actor. Like, I immediately was like, oh, I like you. Like, you seem like a relatable kind of guy. But I felt exactly the same way. Like, maybe as a different character, maybe even like as a dad character would have like knocked it out of the park. I thought that as far as being sort of the really concerned doctor trying to portray this, right, Michael Myers as being a monster, totally didn't quite deliver. I agree 100%. I felt like there were scenes where he was overacting. There were scenes where he was underacting. The accent could have worked, a million times over. I think he totally could have made that work. But it just was, I don't know, he just didn't quite land it.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually disagree, I think. I think that his acting was dramatic, and I think the movie needed a little bit of that drama. Like, so much of the rest of the movie is just people doing normal things and going about their normal business with Michael Myers watching them over, the camera over his shoulder. There is no rising tension to some extent without Loomis sort of telling you that this thing's coming, that he's, I know there is an implicit one in just the sort of Michael Myers stalking, but I liked the drama, and I thought he did a good job of selling a guy who had been, watching this kid for 8 years and had made it his mission to make sure that he was never going to see the light of day. So I don't know. I liked him.
So I agree that the character and the content was spot on, right? The idea that you basically have to have this guy that's the broken record, to your point, right? Kind of providing the overarching, this guy is a danger, he's a threat, he's back to town, he's gonna kill some people. The danger is very real. And, certainly being in branding and marketing, I can appreciate a soundbite as as much, if not more, than the next person. So the reiteration of that over and over again, I totally appreciated. But it was really, again, I felt like his delivery, right? To the end of the day was just like, could have been creepier. Could have made me more concerned. I hear what you're saying. I'm like mildly concerned. We might need to ramp it up a little bit.
And it was almost like the people in the movie didn't believe it either.
Take him seriously.
Yeah, if he had given any, and I'm a scientist, so science-based, give me some evidence. I want to know why you think he's going to come here and kill all these people, not just say, there's evil behind his eyes, he's going to come.
Yeah, and you almost want him to be, like, more livid, to be, like, that's what I mean, like, some scenes he was over, some scenes he was under. Like, if you really think this threat is real, and these people, to your point, are not believing you, it's freak out time, right? It's time to be, like, grabbing people and be like, you need to believe me, he's back, like, it's going to be a massacre, he's going to take... Like, convince somebody.
Well, he didn't want
including the audience.
Yeah, well, he didn't. Yeah, he didn't want the chief to go and tell everybody that Michael Myers had returned and make it a public spectacle. So he was downplaying that aspect of it. Even although I did like the him and the car, because there's a scene at the hardware store where he's like looking at the camera, facing the camera, looking around, and behind him, Michael Myers drives the car past, right? Nobody, he doesn't say, hey, be on the lookout for the hospital car, right? That was very obviously driving around town all day with a guy in a Halloween mask, which is crazy. And then, of course, later on in the movie, he's been standing at the house for, I don't know, hours and hours and hours, and he turns around, and there's the car parked. Oh, right there was Michael Myers. Later that night, Laurie babysits Tommy Doyle, while Annie babysits Lindsay Wallace just across the street, unaware that Michael has followed them. When Annie's boyfriend Paul calls her to come and pick them up, she takes Lindsay over to Tommy's house to spend the night. Annie is just about to leave in her car when Michael, who is hiding in the back seat, strangles her before slitting her throat, killing her.
So she's making popcorn, somehow manages to spill butter all over her clothes, but you don't really see that part. So this is where I always found it hilarious. I'm just going to take off all of my clothes, wear the guys that I'm babysitting's daughter's like white button-down shirt, and I'm going to go into, which is I think weird, a laundry room that is apart from the house. So you have to leave the house that you're wearing knee-high socks and this white button-down shirt to do your laundry, and it's going to be done in time by the time the parents come home.
Yeah. I mean, I had a problem. Like, do babysitters strip down to almost nothing? Basically not in a bathroom. They're just like stripping down, taking their clothes off.
Maybe that's every man's dream, but I've never done that.
Well,
when necessary. if one spills hot butter all over oneself.
I guess. Or maybe it was like because she's babysitting a girl, it doesn't matter. But I found that to be odd. Not that I'm complaining, but I found it to be odd. And yes, even odder was why do they have a detached laundry room?
It is so far away. Like, I always complain about having to just do it on the main level of my house, let alone having to leave the house.
Yeah.
Like in the garage across the yard.
Yeah.
I had to say, I kind of didn't care because I just loved like the risky business tribute sort of going on there. I just thought the look was awesome. In fact, I'm like, did they take that look from Tom Cruise, years later?
Yeah, I was going to say, it came out years later. So.
Yes, exactly. Hey, it's late at night. You're in a private home. You're in a kitchen by yourself that, is secluded. And if you were to, spill hot butter all over yourself and you're like, oh my God, I've got to get this off. Yeah, I mean, I would strip down naked. I mean, at least to my underwear and like grab something. But if there was nothing around, again, like you'd probably do that triage of like, what's closer? Like the laundry room out in the backyard or like a bathroom with a towel or like you'd get something. So, to her credit, she found a random white shirt hanging on the kitchen door. So,
well, she didn't even have a bra on, right? I mean, she didn't have a bra on or anything. She was just like, I mean, if you had a bra and panties on, I guess you'd be okay. You just strip down and but she had like no top at all.
But that was emphasizing her sexuality, right? As somebody who is going to be murdered in moments. So it was just it was just re-emphasizing.
I picked up on that.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah.
So one of these things, since we started these reviews and we've been watching these horror movies, why do so many horror movies actually have popcorn in them? You have Jiffy Pop a couple times in a couple of the movies we've watched, and now you have Jolly Time popcorn in this movie that's being made. It just seems odd.
I was so sad we didn't have the Jiffy Pop. I felt like that was a running theme that we had going through all the movies that we were reviewing. So I was a little bummed.
Also, did you get the big product placement for Tide?
I did.
I mean, the box was like freaking huge.
It was huge. And she positioned it just so.
Yeah, right in the shadow, right through the light. There it is, Tide.
I'm going to get some
Couldn't miss that
super
one.
bright clothes.
I know. I will say, of all the kills in this movie, I think her kill is the best. It has the most, I think, drama and terror in it. She's in the car. She sees the fog on the whole inside the car's fogged up. And she's trying to like, what's going on? And that's when he strikes. I thought that was the most effective.
I feel like each one did have a little comic part to it. So she goes out to go pick up her boyfriend, Paul, who, by the way, was Carpenter's voice when he called her.
Oh,
So,
I like
threw
it.
himself in the movie.
Okay.
Realizes she forgets her keys, goes back to the house, gets her keys, is humming a song the entire time while she's wearing the ridiculous knee-highs and button-down shirt, by the way. Gets into the car and realizes, wait a minute, I didn't unlock the car. Oh, wait, there's fog. Oh no, now I'm dying.
Yeah.
It was a really good scene.
Well, and then she's honking the horn like over and over again, and nobody hears it. Nobody anywhere. Although I guess later on, Laurie physically goes to a neighbor's house and knocks on the door and screams, and they're like, no,
They
not,
peek through the blinds.
Nah,
I'm not gonna let you.
not gonna. That's a prank. That's like a TP thing that's gonna happen on Halloween night. I'm out.
I don't know. Maybe somebody wasn't paying their HOA dues.
Yeah, something. Or they ran out of candy for Halloween.
didn't
They were like, we're not gonna open
appreciate
it up. Yeah,
the secondary building for their laundry.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. To me, it seemed like a very real scene where she goes out there and she goes to the car and it's like, it's locked. I gotta go get the keys. Like how many of us have done that? And then you go back in. Also, I love the 70s handle on the car, the old school. I drove like a 78 Ford Fairmont, was my first car. So it was very reminiscent. It might have actually been like the same car. And then comes back and has that, You have that like, was I crazy? But yeah, distracted by what's going on in the windshield. I thought that the gagging sort of, that reality was pretty well played. The stabbing, I thought was lame, right?
Yeah.
Where he like, quote unquote, slices her. Again, there's no blood. There's no actual slice. It's kind of like, is that really a real knife? At this point, I'm kind of like, okay, it's just the film. Like, there's just not going to be a lot of blood. There's not going to be a lot of gore, and that's okay. But yeah, so that to me, I liked the setup. And the execution was like, eh.
Yeah, the other thing about this kill and Michael Myers in general is I knew he had the heavy breathing, right, through the mask, but I didn't realize how many other sounds he makes that makes him seem a lot less, I don't want to say scary, but more human, I guess, than I expected. Like, I'm much more familiar with Jason Voorhees, right? And I kind of always thought of them as sort of very similar. And Jason, like, makes zero sound. So, like, I don't think he's even breathing. Michael Myers makes that breathing sound, which is supposed to be kind of suspenseful and scary. But then he also kind of makes, like, grunts and kind of does some things that I found made him less scary to me.
I enjoyed how the way they make him pop up throughout the different scenes. So for a while there, as you see him through the town during the day, he's a full person. He's popping up. He's broad daylight. But then during the nighttime scenes, you just kind of get like this darkness around him, and then his like face kind of glows. So in that scene where he's killing Annie, you see him in the rearview mirror, and it's just kind of like you just see like just a brief, his face just pops up, and then you're like, oh darn, she's gonna die.
Yeah.
And I enjoy how they made that pop up through the rest of the movie. I guess with it being dark, they just kind of made his face illuminate.
Soon after, Linda and her boyfriend Bob arrive at Lindsay's house. After having sex, Bob goes downstairs to get a beer for Linda, but Michael stabs him and pins him to a wall, killing him. Michael then poses as Bob in a ghost costume and confronts Linda, who teases him to no effect. Annoyed, Linda calls Laurie, but Michael strangles her to death with a telephone wire just as Laurie picks up. Meanwhile, Loomis discovers the stolen car and begins searching the streets. I am going to tell you the most shocking thing in this movie, and I'm not sure you're going to believe me, because I don't know if you picked up on it or not. But when Linda and Bob are in their car, getting ready to go into the house, they're talking about what they're going to do, how they're going to have sex. And Bob says at the end about, let me see if I can find it in my notes, ripping Lindsay's clothes off. Lindsay is the little girl that supposedly is being babysat right now in that house. That's probably the scariest thing in this movie.
I was so confused. I thought I was getting names confused because we've got Lori, Lindsay, Linda. I was like, wait, first time you're watching this. And then later they talk about Lindsay, the little girl again. I was like, oh no, it was. Yeah, what are we going to do? Rip Lindsay's clothing off, something like that. And invite her to join or something like that. And you're like, wait, what?
Well, Linda didn't want her blouse ripped because it's too expensive.
Right.
So clearly it's okay to rip Lindsay's jumper off that was plaid.
That was weird.
Yeah, I'm assuming what happened in reality is there's all these L names, and he said Lindsay, and they just had to go with it, and they just kind of went with it or didn't catch it, and that's where it is. Because I don't think they're implying that these two want to have a threesome with like a, what? 6-year-old or 8-year-old?
Well, and I felt like who they meant was Annie.
Yes.
And I was like, that's not even one of the L's. I was like, wait. At least she's cute.
There was no interaction between them and Lindsay, so you would assume that it wasn't supposed to be Lindsay.
Yes. But I was surprised when I heard it. I was like, what?
Or maybe Laurie, the prude. I mean, she's not there. So I thought, it could be like a fun, like making fun of the Girl Scout. Oh, we're going to like rip her clothing off and get her involved. But
right.
Yeah.
That would have been more funny. You're right. To have the threesome with the girl who's clearly never had sex.
So they're upstairs. And they're having, quote unquote, having sex, whatever. But it was interesting. All I could focus on was the jack-o'-lantern on the bedstand or on the nightstand, like just sitting there. I'm like, who brought the jack-o'-lantern upstairs and lit it before they had sex? Was that like that wasn't part of the instructions when they were in the car describing what was going to happen?
I thought that was very dangerous.
Yes, I know. I was thinking about fire safety.
Ditto. I mean, there's, a lot of bumping and grinding going on. You can bump that nightstand. I mean, again, just, and right, whose room are you in? Are you in the parents' room? And they've got this randomly lit jack-o'-lantern. And then you're going to get so busted because you're going to set the freaking house on fire.
But how do they go upstairs without, so they don't find Lindsay or Annie or Paul? And yet they're like, okay, nobody's here. Let's just have sex.
Well,
not supposed to be here.
They talk to Lori.
Oh, and she says she's going to get Paul.
And she says she's going to get Paul. And then they're like, whoa, we have like 5 minutes. We can.
Right.
Well, he's like, he's like, we have 5 minutes. We're okay.
I did love the interaction between Linda and Bob. I felt like that was like legitimately how a couple would act at that age. Like, hey, go get me a beer. No, you get me a beer. Oh, do you want more sex? Then you better get me the beer. Yeah. So I enjoyed that part. And then he heads downstairs, and then his death I think is my least favorite.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that bothers me about it is that Michael Myers stabs him with an overhand sort of thrust, and yet the knife is kind of like what you would think you would have to horizontal sort of to pin him to the wall. So I was a little confused by that. But I did like after that when he's sort of pinned to the wall and Michael's standing there and he's kind of turning his head one way and the other and kind of looking at him.
Yeah, I felt like that was it's almost like he's trying to figure out what death means or something, and that's why he keeps killing. Like as he's killing people, he definitely stares at them as like he's trying to study it. He's trying to memorize how death happens when you murder somebody.
Yeah, I think he's actually staring at him trying to figure out what he's going to do with the body. Because he's like, can I fit him in that closet that later on he falls from? I think that's what he's actually trying to figure out.
So this is where I was like, man, the rules are kicking in heavy, because that's when the boyfriend left and said, I'll be right back.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so I just love that, right? I thought that, kudos to us for doing Scream first. That's all I can say. Because it was really cool, seeing those rules kind of in effect here. And then he goes down. I agree. I mean, I thought the jump factor of his death was good, right? That he turns around and like, bam, Michael Myers is right there. I thought that was good, and pinning him to the wall. Again, the lack of blood, it's not that, I love the gore, but you're kind of, even when they looked at his feet without shoes on, I really expected to see some blood trickling down on his feet or something like that.
Well, and then later on, Lori comes into that house. And she doesn't realize that somebody had been killed right there, and the body's gone. There's no blood. I mean, maybe Michael Myers was like cleaning up after himself to kind of stage everything. I don't know.
He brought the Clorox wipes with him from the ward.
Yeah, maybe. It's very clean at the hospital. Very clean.
But I will say, I think Linda's death was one of my favorites. I liked Annie's a lot. I thought that was done well. But the choking with the phone cable, I just thought that was really like visceral. For the for people who remember rotary phones back in the day, also, I love the dialing of the 7 digits.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how you didn't need area codes back in the day. You just dialed 7 digits because nobody lived outside of your area code, or you would just dial 1 if you needed to. So I thought that was cool. And then, yeah, like the old school phone, with the spiral cable choking her, that seemed very violent to me. And it seemed very realistic to me. So I thought that was a great death.
So the interesting thing about that scene, I thought, was when she's talking to Lori, at first, and I don't know if you ladies got that impression, but it seemed like she maybe thought that she was having sex with her boyfriend. Like there was almost like an orgasmic sort of sound to it, and then it turned into sort of gasping for air and the gurgling and all that other stuff. Am I the only one?
No,
Yeah.
I definitely picked up on that.
I think that was the point. Yeah,
Good.
I was just kind of like, yeah, that's, that's where she thinks that she's having sex. She thinks she's having fun. Then, oops, she died.
Yeah.
It happens sometimes.
I loved how he put the sheet over him because he's not a funny character. You don't find him funny at all. And then he puts the sheet over him. And I don't know if it was reminiscent because she was the one who reminded me most of the sister, Judith. That he was like, here's a costume. I need a costume when I kill this one.
He already had one. He had the mask. He had 2 masks on.
I don't think the mask was enough for him for that moment. I think he needed to, because,
recreate the scene.
Right.
You are so
because
right.
She's naked. She has kind of like the blonde hair.
Yeah, that he's dressing up in a costume to be something familiar. No, you're totally right.
Wow.
I feel like the mask was not really him putting a mask on as like a costume, but just like him feeling more like himself.
Well,
it was an
this is him-
expressionless mask.
Well, this is him pretending to be the boyfriend.
Right.
Again.
That's the thing, right? I mean, he's pretending to be Bob.
Yeah.
Right. So in some ways, it's him trying to be the boyfriend of his sister at the beginning, right? He's trying to fulfill that role that he can't fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's why he kills.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, bringing back when you see the death scene, the tombstone with her in the bed, really, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was
Well,
impersonating.
that wasn't her, though, right? That's Annie in the bed.
Oh, it is.
It's the blonde is like stuffed in half.
Which also I didn't think that was right.
Yeah, they should have kept her there because then my theory would be right.
Yeah, well, they should have kept her there. It didn't make any sense that they would basically move her, like kind of tumbled in that dumbwaiter thing. Although that was creepy. I liked the effect. I thought the characterization was all wrong. I totally agree that she should have stayed in the bed and Annie. Sorry, Annie, you should have been stuffed in the dumbwaiter.
Maybe she didn't fit.
Maybe. Like she was smaller though, which also kind of logistically confused me.
Was it the same room? I don't know. Was it the room that they were killed in, the same room that he stages with the tombstone? It wasn't shot in the same way.
The jack-o'-lantern was there.
Come on, Ray.
Because that illuminated the tombstone's name. It's Tombstone. Yeah.
Okay.
Watch the props, man.
No, I know. The way it was shot, like when he comes in as Bob and the way that they shot from her angle out where he's wearing the ghost costume doesn't seem the same as the way they were shooting off the hallway. And then to the left, there was the room, the bedroom that he was in versus the right where she stages the kids. Like, I don't know. They didn't film it the same way, so I didn't feel like it was the same room.
Right. Maybe you're right, but I know there was a jack-o'-lantern there.
Well, maybe he moved it from one room to the other.
Maybe. I mean, he's cleaning them up after himself, moving all these bodies.
I mean, his movie is called Halloween. Maybe he likes
true.
jack-o'-lanterns. I don't know.
They only had the one pumpkin, so they had to move it from scene to scene.
They just cut extra, like, teeth out or whatever to make it look a little different.
Oh, man.
After putting Tommy and Lindsay to bed, a suspicious Lori goes over to Lindsay's house. There she finds the bodies of Annie, Bob, and Linda in an upstairs bedroom, as well as Judith Meyer's headstone. Horrified, Lori cowers in a hallway. Michael suddenly appears and attacks her, slashing her arm. Barely escaping, Lori races back to Tommy's house. Michael gets in and attacks her again, but Lori manages to fend him off long enough for Tommy and Lindsay to escape. Loomis sees the 2 children fleeing the house and goes to investigate, finding Michael and Lori fighting upstairs. Loomis shoots Michael 6 times, knocking him off the balcony. When Loomis goes to check on Michael's body, he finds it missing. Loomis stares off into the night while Lori begins sobbing in terror.
So my favorite part of the movie is just when he enters the house and is attacking her. Because it's like he's relentless and he's coming after her and she stabs him with the knitting needle and then picks up his knife and stabs him with that and drops the knife. And you're like, why are you dropping the knife? Don't drop the knife. Like, he's gonna get up. And every time he gets up, it's like this weird mechanical type motion. Like he doesn't get up like a normal human being where you're like, oh, I just got stabbed and struggling. He just pops up weird.
Yeah, he sits straight up. Like, yeah.
So then she like eventually goes up, and it's the scene in the closet, which all hands down favorite part. Stabs him with a hanger. I think that's just so awesome. And he's just like, oh, like you stabbed me with a hanger, and I'm going to collapse on the ground. And then he pops up very oddly there, and then just turns his head weird. And I just love that part.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, taking it back to, the first scene where she's going into the house and finding all the dead friends, I thought that was well done too. I thought that was really intense. So, right, she's walking through the house and you sort of start putting yourself in her shoes, like seeing dead friend after dead friend after dead friend. I mean, a handful of your high school besties are now murdered, bloody murdered, and being stuffed in dumbwaiters and in closets and like in this memorial with the tombstone, which again, you're like, oh my God, okay, was the tombstone in the car? Because again, that's one freaking heavy beast. How'd you carry that all the way up there to sort of pristine? But, that kind of starts creeping you out. But of course, the one thing that drives me crazy is that she's freaking out. He's behind her. Again, back to the scream scene, turn around, Jamie, turn around. He lunges out at her to stab her, and she's all of 1 foot away from him, and he misses. Right, he glances her arm, and you're just like, oh. And then she like falls down the stairs, and that was a brutal fall. I mean, she falls an entire flight of stairs. So she does a good job of hobbling. So I thought that was good. Right, she's like sort of slightly injured, slightly maimed. But yeah, that was one of those like I was like, oh, I don't know, you can't totally brutalize her. She's got to be able to run and do the rest of the movie believably. But the fact that he barely touched her on the arm with the knife, that kind of bothered me.
I thought that scene where she's standing and he comes out of the shadows was the best scene of sort of his visualization. So only his masks kind of comes out, and then yes, he misses with the one time he actually misses.
Yes, exactly.
with the knife, and then on her arm, it's just like a line of blood. It's not even like a cut; it's just like a little line. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure she would survive falling. She doesn't fall down the stairs. She falls over the banister and lands on the stairs, which I'm pretty sure your leg might be hurt, but I think your back's broken.
I loved the part where she's trying to get out of the house. She can't get out of the house.
Oh, yeah.
Then she finally gets to the glass doors, and he had propped a rake up so that she couldn't, or a garden hoe, so she can't get out. And I'm like, there's a chair right there. Grab the chair. And he's coming, and he's trying to bang through the door that she locks with the knife. She's not grabbing the chair. And then she breaks through the glass with her fist. It's like, why didn't you grab the chair? But she gets out and then runs across the street.
But I will say that they do set up the movie so that all the kids in the movie seem authentic and believable. And she really has, I mean, yes, he was kind of stalking them throughout the day, but she kind of wrote that off, I think. So when she encounters her dead friends, I mean, you can believe that she's in a state of shock, that she's not like in her right mind. So she's just trying to open this door over and over again, and she can't open it, and he's banging on the door trying to get through. So I think of all the female protagonists of horror movies, slasher movies that have come since then, she's probably the most believable in this sort of, I'm shocked, I don't know what I'm doing.
That is true.
Yeah, I have to say, I just thought it felt a little out of character for me that Michael Myers was so methodical about the rake.
Right.
Because I thought the same thing. I was like, wait a second. Did he really think it that far through? Because I appreciated the idea if we were adding that layer to his character, that he, sort of thinks through all the variables and sets the scene and comes up on them. And if you think about it, thinking back, he does to a certain degree, right, with his kills. But it seemed a little bit, I don't know, not gimmicky, just, out of character for him, maybe like a little contrived, that he had sort of the wherewithal, the foresight to go and get this rake and prop it against the door and block her in.
Well, he did change the sheets on the bed before he staged Annie. So, I mean, he's capable. And also, he actually, the one scene that does actually point more back to what you're talking about is he's outside at some point and he breaks the flower pot, I think, above his head to kind of like I think it's Annie at that point, which to kind of get her attention. So he does kind of do things. So yeah, I can get behind it.
You just don't really see him as an intelligent killer, and yet he's doing these things that, and yes, he drives a car without obviously ever having been taught. And
although at least they address it in the
They
movie,
do,
right? It's not
yes.
something they ignore. The guy says, "How does he know how to drive?" And Lumen's like, "Someone must have taught him," and he gets in the
Right.
So, I mean, at least that was there.
But overall, you wouldn't have expected these kinds of intelligent things coming from somebody who just is so blank-faced. And I know he's wearing a mask. You don't really see what's going on underneath, but I think that's why he chose it, because there really is no emotion going on. He's just going through trying to get these kills.
I think he chose the mask because it was the only one there. He wanted a clown mask, but he couldn't
That
get
was
it.
an option, and they chose against it.
Yeah.
Also, what are they doing selling Halloween masks at a hardware store? Is that
Look,
weird?
listen, this is before Spirit Halloween and your.
butcher knives. So yeah, I understand
It-
knives, but butcher knives.
Yeah.
It's a
weird.
general. It's the general store. It had a little bit of everything. It was a small town.
I wish he had like a tool belt with the knives in him. That would have been way cooler.
Yes, I agree.
Various sizes and options. Okay, so then of course, right, she escapes. She runs across. She gets into the house with the kids. So then, of course, you're like, oh my god, don't lure this evil character back towards the kids. But she's just trying to get to safety. I like that she gets in the house and then like the windows kind of eerily open, right? That he comes through that. But then he misses her again, which bothered me. Like he, the only character of this whole movie that he has bad aim.
See, here's the thing. You have to understand. She has a virginity aura that deflects slightly the probability of him hitting her and getting her, and that's what's saving her.
His depth perception is off because she's
So pure.
so chaste.
Yep.
Minus the pot halo.
That's why she gets cut in the arm only slightly. That's the pot right there. The
Right.
rest of it, she's pure.
Right, because she didn't fully inhale.
She did not.
But I mean, I totally agree again with Helen's point that that she grabs this knitting needle, which you knew the knitting had to come into it. She's like carrying this honking big bag of knitting needles around, and you're like, does the woman even know how to knit? Pulls out this the needle, stabs him in the neck. And then again, which I thought was good. I thought that was visceral, but it's the same idea, right? Like he falls down and then like she grabs the knife, she tosses it. I have on my paper a giant stupid written. Like what were you thinking? But it's, kind of classic quintessential again. Like they're being, a little stupid about it, but you can just kind of say, hey, all the friends were killed. She's not jaded, right? This isn't 30, 40 years later where you've seen the killers come back. It takes a lot more than a knitting needle to kill them. She doesn't want to kill anybody. I mean, nobody, it's not like, well, let me go over and stab him in the chest 20 more times. Make sure he's dead. I think she's just kind of in that like days of denial of just like, okay, all right, he's down. It's done.
Yeah, from the genre's point of view, I don't know if before this movie, like in Hitchcock's movies and things, if the whole trope of, you've stabbed him and he's dead in the background and you're in the foreground and then he gets up to come after you again is like a thing, or if this movie invented that, but certainly they go back to it a couple times here.
Right at that point with the knitting needle, and I think she gets the kids to get out of the house. Tommy says, you can't kill the boogeyman. So it's just foreshadowing, hey, he's going to come back for you. And I just think that at that point I would have said, so where did I put that knife? Maybe I should go grab it before he does wake up.
Well, and I can get her stabbing in the neck with the needle, and then she's kind of exhausted or whatever. But then when he gets back up and he comes up the stairs, and then she goes in the closet and she stabs him with the clothes hanger, and then the knife, I believe, right? And then he's dead on the ground outside of the closet, and then she goes to the doorway and is like leaning against the doorway, and she's facing out. At that point, you should not be looking away.
She didn't learn her lesson.
Yes.
Yeah, I have in my notes. Yeah, she tosses the knife again. You're like, really, really, really? You didn't learn it the first time. Also, it kind of annoyed me that she locked herself in possibly the worst location in the entire house. Right, flimsy accordion closet doors. Like, this is going to protect me. Let me grab a tie and tie it around the handles, and he totally can't find me / bust in here. Also, I forget whatever. There's another movie, I can't think of it right now, where somebody does lock them in a very similar closet and they're trying to be very quiet. She was not so quiet. I mean, I get that you're freaking out and it's hard to control it, but you're kind of like, shut up, Jamie. Maybe he won't find you and you'll have a chance.
I think that's the point. Yeah, the point is that she can't control herself and that she's loud and you're supposed to be like, shut up, shut up.
I just love how at every point where the audience sees Michael Myers, and then the character in there isn't. So the entire time you're rooting for the character to like turn around, or run down the stairs, or why would you choose a closet? But you just can't. They aren't going to listen to you because it's a movie.
Right.
I did like how I guess she was trying to throw him off by opening the door or the window or whatever out to the balcony. I don't know, it was out to the balcony. It was a window or whatever. And then she goes back into the closet. I was like, okay, I can maybe buy that. Like maybe he's going to go out that way. But then, yes, she's whimpering and he's not fooled at all, I guess.
But I appreciated, again, that the Girl Scout was very inventive and she grabbed that hanger and railed him, which I was just like, you are a hose. I mean, I was like, I don't know how she's going to get out of this one.
That's true.
You're literally in a closet. You've got nowhere to go. He's hacking through, the particle board accordion doors. I was like, you are so hosed. So I thought that was kind of cool. Like, I think that, Girl Scouts aren't as big today as they were back in the day, so I thought probably the reference was probably funnier, more interesting, just more poignant kind of back in the day. But the idea that she grabs the knitting needle, right then she grabs the hanger, like she's literally making the weapons as she kind of goes along, and gets them good. So go Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, and I was surprised that at the very end when Loomis shows up, I was surprised that she pulled the mask off briefly. That they even showed his face at all. And at first, his one eye that she stabs is all like closed up or whatever. And I didn't realize at first it was because she had stabbed him. And it just reminded me so much of Jason Voorhees once again. Like, because he's supposed to have been sort of physically deformed. And I was like, why does he look like that? Oh, yeah, okay, she stabbed him in the eye. Like, he's a normal looking dude otherwise. And then Loomis, of course, pumps him full of lead and then he falls out of the window.
So every time I saw this movie, and this was something that I found as a fun fact, I've always thought his face was unbelievably grotesque. And then I read that because of the way they shot the film, the majority of people see that because you imagine him being a monster. That you don't imagine him being a normal guy, but it was just the guy's face with the small cut. Yeah. So I was really looking this time to see, like, what did his face look like? And he was a normal guy. I was like, how did I perceive that? Like, it's crazy how just watching the film, you just would imagine that he was a monster.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Certainly being a first-time viewer when I saw it, I think I was like maybe in the middle of writing a note. And so as I glanced up and I saw it looked like a very clean face, but I couldn't quite see what was happening with his eye. I thought maybe he had like a prosthetic or makeup or bad makeup. There was like something going on around his eye. But I was just like, okay, I don't know. Have to go back and watch that in slow-mo and see what was going on. But this is again where that scene is where the doctor turns around and he sees the car 20 feet away, right? Runs over and then he sees the kids. One of the things that I thought was actually pretty terrifying in this movie, and we talked a little bit about before, is trying to seek help from the neighbors and not getting any. Mm-hmm. So again, the idea that you're in a neighborhood where you feel protected because there are people around and you're running, like banging from door to door and people are just like,
right, and
not
they were
believing you.
Clearly babysitting these kids on a routine basis because of the relationship that they had.
Yeah. So then in the end, because this is, obviously the end of it, one of the things that you had mentioned, Ray, throughout the movie was the heavy breathing. And throughout the movie, I didn't overtly notice it as sort of like a standout effect, just sort of something inherent with the character, like kind of as you're going through it. But I loved in the end when he disappears. And again, right, to that sort of first-person camera view, when you have it with the kid with the mask in the beginning, you have this sort of handy cam going around looking with the heavy breathing. And it was like, and it's in the house, and then it's in the backyard, and then it's down the street, and you're kind of like, oh, I love this, because it's basically saying he could be anywhere.
Right. That's exactly what I had in my notes, that exactly how you wrote it out, and then just evil can be anywhere.
Yeah, it was so good. I love that.
Now that we've reviewed the movie, it's time to rate it. Only the best movies make it to the top of the hill, and to be the best, they have to perform in 3 categories. First, technical composition, which represents how well the movie is made, including script, directing, cinematography, acting, and effects. Impact, which represents how well the movie accomplished its emotional intent. Was it scary? Was it funny? Did it make you question mankind or the nature of your reality? And finally, enjoyment, which is pretty simple. How much did you enjoy the movie? Would you watch it again? Do you never want to see it again? First, let's talk about technical composition. What'd you think, Helen?
So I would have given it a 7. I also agree that the lack of blood during some of the killings was not realistic enough for me, despite knowing that it was on a very low budget. The scientific, unrealistic type of, like, just knowing that you stab somebody and they're suspended with a butcher knife didn't seem realistic to me. And some of the scenes that just didn't kind of like tie in as well as I thought that they could have, like the matchbooks, the acting of Dr. Loomis, I felt like was a little off, but overall, like, I thought it was pretty good.
Anne?
Technically, I thought this film had a lot of issues. I think that, there weren't a lot of effects, so you didn't really get that bonus technical rating, which some movies will inherently get bumped up from. I think that, as we talked about sort of the convenience factor, I'll wait for the other categories to dig into it a little bit further, but technically I gave this a 4.
Yeah, so I thought this movie looked a lot better than I expected it to. I also thought that overall, being the sort of first modern slasher movie, it did a good job. But as you pointed out, Helen and there's a lot to be desired as far as the blood and some of the effects. And I can't get past the fact that the trees are green, the grass is green, and there's no leaves, dead leaves in the background. So I am going to give this movie a 6 from a technical perspective. All right, next, let's talk about impact. Anne, do you want to talk about the impact?
Sure, absolutely. So I thought the impact overall was pretty good. There were some good jump scenes. There was some good suspense. We talked a little bit about the soundtrack. The soundtrack was epic. It was awesome then.
Yeah, I liked it.
Awesome now. I loved it. Totally, we had like basically 6 bars of the score that we use over and over again. I don't care. I thought it was awesome. So I gave it actually a 6 for impact.
Okay, Helen?
Okay, so I gave it an 8, but that's probably because I love this movie that I'm rating it so high.
That's okay.
I feel like, especially with all of the issues that we have going on in today's world with, kids coming in and hurting their fellow classmates, that you just never know who's going to hurt you or when. And this is kind of like tying into that because you don't know who the boogeyman is, essentially. So I felt like even though this was made in the 70s, that it is relevant to today, and that it was just horrifying.
Okay, and I gave this movie a 2 for an impact. I'm sorry. It wasn't scary to me. The jump scares weren't especially jumpy to me. There were a couple times. I enjoyed the first, I would say 2/3 of the movie much more than I enjoyed the last third of the movie. The build up, this sort of depiction of the town and the girls and all of that, I kind of liked more. Although I'm finding that as I do these reviews, I'm learning more about myself as a movie watcher, and I think I kind of like the build up more and the sort of slow burn part more than I actually like some of the visceral horror of the movies. I gave it a 2. All right, and finally, let's talk about enjoyment. Anne?
So despite the fact that I gave Tech 4, Impact a 6, I enjoyed this movie. So I actually gave it a 7. I love the 70s. I like the slow burn. I do enjoy, just sort of the methodical pacing of that. I think a lot of modern movies have serious struggles with pacing. They're trying to do too much in too little time.
Yeah.
It's too fast. It's jumpy all over the place. There's a lot of stuff just flying every direction. This was one of those where I enjoyed it. And, when you hear people say, I watched this 8 times every Halloween season, you can understand why. It's definitely something I would go back to watch. It's probably not something I'm going to go out and buy the DVD. Sorry, Helen. And watch it 5 more times over the next week. But, if it's on TV or if somebody's like, would you want to watch this? I'd be like, yeah, let's pop some popcorn and watch it.
Yeah, for myself, I rated it a 4, which on our scale, 1 through 3 is the bottom and 4 through 6 is sort of the average. And it was slightly less than average enjoyment for me. I apologize, Helen. I did enjoy it, but I enjoyed it more for the historical aspect and watching the sort of first slasher movie than I actually did for the story that it was trying to tell.
I gave it a 10. No surprise. I will always watch it.
And I think it's our first perfect score of all the scores we've given the movies we've reviewed so far. So,
All right, so our scale of rating for Halloween, we've got 1 to 3. I loved it about as much as I love those fake leaves. We've got 4 to 6, right in the safe zone of, okay, I could live with the fake pumpkins. And we've got 7 to 9. I enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. In fact, I might even be Michael Myers for this Halloween. And number 10 is, I love this so much, I'm renaming my 3 kids Jamie, Lee, and Curtis.
Nice. So could you tell us, Anne, what each of our individual scores were and then the overall score for Halloween?
Absolutely. So, Ray, you came in at probably your lowest score for any of these movies yet, a solid 4.
Good.
Ouch. Helen, you came in above the average, which you can imagine, this being one of your absolute favorite films, at an 8.3. And I came in right in the middle there, right in the safe zone, having highs and lows in my rating at a 5.6, meaning that the average for this film came in at a 5.97.
Okay, so that actually places Halloween slightly above The Ring. Yeah, but below our top movie, which is still Annabelle.
Well, as long as it's over The Evil Dead 2, I will be a happy person.
If you enjoyed this podcast, help us grow our audience. Rate and review us on iTunes, and please share with your friends and family on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms. I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Hilltop Horror Movie Reviews. I'm your host, Ray Richards, and on behalf of my co-hosts, I hope you'll join us next time when we review Halloween 2018.
Before we end, I just want to shout out this really crazy fun fact that I found about a government conspiracy theory. So, some person, and this is not supposedly real, discovered that this serial killer out there named Stanley Stiers is what was motivating the Halloween movie.
Okay.
So he was born in 1912 and went on a 1920s killing spree in Iowa. His background kind of ties into the Rob Zombie version of Halloween. So that's like a white trash background.
Okay.
He was a child who was abused by 2 drunken parents. They had found out that he was switched at birth by a diabolical nurse who this guy then later kills during his rampage. And that child who was theirs was later killed in a car accident, so they couldn't just do a switch. Then he snapped on midnight of Halloween Eve. He whipped out a butcher knife, kills the entire family, and also the dog named Mr. Snookers.
Mr. Snookers.
Yes. Apparently the dog, Mr. Snookers, was terrorizing the neighborhood, so not many people were upset that the dog got killed. He also killed his bully classmates and one classmate and his entire family. He had superhuman strength. And then the next day he was captured at the park eating Halloween candy.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, he worked up an appetite, I'm sure.
Later was placed into a mental institution, escaped, and then got shot at multiple times by the feds. So reports of his murders still occur today. The last one was in 2017. So this guy's like 106 years old at this time. So they believe it's like a supernatural thing. And he's on the Paranormal Defense Agency list as number 9 on the 10 most wanted.
Wow.
So apparently we have a Paranormal Defense Agency list.
I was going to say, I'm not sure which I was more shocked at, the fact that he's 106 years old and still murdering people, or the fact that we have this Paranormal Defense list. We got to get a copy of that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So I'm going to do more research into that. I had to stop at that point, but I was just floored that there's an entire website on this.
Wow.
On this man.
It'd be interesting. So did you read at all whether it actually is connected to the genesis of the Halloween story? Like, did they take that and use it as the basis for the movie, or is it just coincidental that all these things sort of link up?
So this is apparently completely made up.
Okay.
And that Halloween is not based on that at all.
Okay.
I don't know if the later movies tried to explain it and tie it into his... I mean, I guess some people believe it because it's a conspiracy theory.
Sure.
But it completely sounds unrealistic when you're 106 and
I don't know.
People.
They are making Halloween 2018, in which he is 60 something, because the original movie came out in 78. He was like 23, I believe, at that point. It says 21 in our wiki, but actually 23 for the credits at the end of the movie.
Oh.
So So he's
That's
like
true.
60-something in this movie and still killing people.
That's true. We
So-
don't know how he's killing people because we haven't seen it yet.
That's
so
true.
Maybe he's aged.
That could be, but 102, he could get there maybe.